Hello everybody and welcome to First Attack here on the Chensor Dynasty. That is of course twitch.tv/jchensor. I am your host James Chen, aka jchensor, and this is the series of streams and videos where I teach you how to play fighting games from a very philosophical standpoint, trying to help people learn fighting games for beginners and intermediate players alike. Now, in the past few episodes, we've been going over trying to gain advantage against the opponent. We've been talking about pressure and advantage, and we're going to continue forward with that by continuing talking about frame data. Last episode, I showed a little bit more of a visual example of what exactly is happening with frames and how frame data works. And, you know, I hinted that this week we're going to get into being able to now look at a frame data table, which are so important in fighting games these days. But we're going to look at these frame data tables and really start to understand how to process and parse the frame data tables. And to do that, I need to introduce you guys to a concept known as the magic number. Okay, this is a pretty vague sounding concept here, but hopefully by the end of this will make all sense to you guys. So here we go. So in the last episode, when we looked at a sample of a frame data table, we kind of established already which columns are the most important ones to look at. You can see highlighted in red down and below. You see the startup column and the on hit and on block. And again, I showed you guys how that all worked with my super cool and, you know, awesome Excel spreadsheet on exactly how that plays out visually. And so, you know, we're looking at on hit and on block, but you know, one of the things that actually comes down to is when you look at a frame data table, you really start trying to focus on the concept of things that are safe, things that are punishable. And so what we really start looking at actually is mostly the on block column. This is actually going to be probably one of the most important columns in a frame data table. And by the end of this, I'm going to be going through a whole page of one character's frame data table and show you why this column is so important and how to interpret it. But let's keep going. And like I said, that'll happen towards the end. So when we look at all these numbers in the on block column, because like I said, that's going to be kind of one of the more important columns. Well, when we look at this, you know, last episode, I already explained to you exactly what those numbers mean from a technical standpoint, from a very scientific standpoint. If you look at these numbers, 2, 3, -2, I showed you with the Excel spreadsheet that when you're -2, it's because you could move 2 frames after the opponent can. They have a 2-frame head start. If you're +4, you have 4 frames that you can move before the opponent can. Well, you know, now you guys understand what the numbers are actually telling you. But the problem is, you guys still don't know exactly what the numbers are telling you, because while the numbers now make sense in terms of a scientific frame time calculation kind of thing, we need to be able to take those numbers and interpret them, change them into something that can tell us exactly what those numbers mean. And you don't want to memorize these numbers, as I've said. So one of the important things you're going to want to do is take these numbers and start translating them into categories. And that's what we're going to do here. And I'm going to show you what these categories are for moves and for this kind of frame data. So what are the categories that we're going to have? So what I'm going to do is bust out this little graphic over here. And what I'm going to show you here is there are 4 sections here, but then there's also this black bar here. This is how you're basically going to judge and categorize almost every attack in almost every fighting game these days. Now, of course, some games are more frame data heavy than others. So you might not need this kind of information as much, but a lot of the modern fighting games that we play today, such as Street Fighter V, Tekken 7, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, Mortal Kombat 11, are all going to rely on this concept right here. In fact, if you even go into Grand Blue Fantasy Versus' training mode, they have almost all of these same categories in their frame data coloring scheme. So let's take a look at what these categories are. Well, the top green one over here means, and of course you're looking at this from you as the attacker standpoint, you'll see that there is one category of having a large advantage. And again, I'll go into this, what this means a little bit more, but this basically means if you have a large advantage, then you have combo possibilities, you have the ability to make things a true block string. I talked about that in the last episode when two moves actually overlap one character's block stun. That means it becomes a true block string. If they overlap the hit stun, then that's a combo. So that's what you get when you have a large advantage, is you get the possibility for combos and true block string. Now, this light green square over here is you have a small advantage. And this is where people kind of refer to this as your turn. So if you do a move and you have a small advantage afterwards, it's your turn. And again, turns are such a vague concept, and that will be covered soon. So don't worry about that. Just understand that if you find yourself after a move on block and you have a slight advantage, it's your turn to attack. The opponent has to respect you. Now, there is a situation here where sometimes if you get hit by something or if you block something, you're 0 on block, 0 on hit, and if you are 0, both of you are at neutral. I talked about the neutral before and said that neutral is all about having both players neither having an advantage at all. And so in situations where a move ends up with being 0, that means you're both at neutral. Even if you're right next to each other, because you're both at the exact same moment can do this, whatever you want, it's technically neutral even though you guys are in each other's face. It just happens to be a very uncomfortable position, and you will be leaving neutral very, very quickly in most of those situations because of the proximity that you two have with each other. Now, once we get into yellow, this is when things start to get a little more dangerous. If you're in the yellow square, you are in a small disadvantage, which means it's their turn. And keep in mind, again, this is on hit or on block. This is for both. So you have two different possibilities to reach these numbers. So if we go up here and look at this again, we do see that there is the on hit and on block. And so, for example, standing light punch is +2 on block, and a standing heavy punch is +2 on hit. Well, if you block my light punch or if you get hit by my heavy punch, you're kind of in the same situation. You're in a small advantage. So it's, even though it's on hit or on block, you end up with the same kind of situation. So after you hit your opponent, if you happen to be in the yellow box here, you're going to be at a small disadvantage, which means it's their turn, which means you have to respect the opponent's actions after this action occurs. After you hit them, again, whether they block or get hit, you have to respect the opponent because it's their turn. Finally, once you're in the red, this is not good because this is what is now considered unsafe. And this means that you can be punished. So this is a large disadvantage, and that means you are punishable. And so this is what you're trying to avoid as much as possible. This is where things become big risks, and you don't want to put yourself in these punishable situations. Now, again, I've talked about these categories. I've avoided using any numbers in these categories over here because, again, I just want you to understand what the 5 different categories are. It is large advantage, small advantage, which means your turn, neutral, small disadvantage, and large disadvantage. Small disadvantage, of course, meaning their turn. And what's interesting, and you'll find out about this, is that the even situation, the neutral, 0 on hit, 0 on block, is actually going to be very, very rare. And this is completely intentional. The way that a lot of fighting game developers are developing fighting games these days is very, very frame data focused. And there is a reason why when you look at frame data for a lot of games, you'll see a lot of numbers repeated constantly, because they know exactly what they want that move to be and what the purpose that move actually serves. So what we're going to talk about here now is the magic number, okay? So I talked to you about all this concept here, but let's finally talk about what this magic number is. And yes, this means we're going to have to start talking about numbers, but like I said, to talk about the magic number is to make sure you don't have to remember anything about numbers anymore. So here we go. And yes, large disadvantage, punishable. Same meaning as unsafe. Basically, if you hear a lot of people say that a move is unsafe, that means it's punishable. So this is very, very same concept. But, so what is the magic number? The magic number is how you determine the categories of your frame data. So again, you have to know this magic number so that when you look at a move in frame data, you can automatically categorize every move into one of these 5 spots over here. So what is the magic number? Well, look, every fighting game has a magic number. And again, this is intentionally designed. It's a very, very Tekken style. Like, I feel like Tekken is kind of what promoted this a little bit. And a lot of games these days are utilizing Tekken systems of frame data. And so Tekken kind of started it, but every game has their own magic number. And so here's the axiom for today. The magic number is always going to be determined by the predominantly fastest move in the game. Fastest moves in the game. In other words, if you look at all of your moves for the whole game, for the entire game, there's going to be one particular number that is going to be prevalent as the fastest number for any move in the game. The way that developers create frame data for their characters is largely based off of this magic number. And again, the reason why the magic number is so important is because since it represents the fastest moves in the game, it determines what moves can or cannot be punished. And again, I'll show you guys this in a little bit in that spreadsheet again. I'm going to be going back to the spreadsheet and I will show you this exactly how this works. But this makes sense. If you have a move that is blocked, and like I said, the on block column is probably one of the most important there. If you have a move that is blocked and you are minus more than the fastest move in the game, by logic, that means you can be punished by the fastest move in the game. And so that's when you start reaching danger points. That's when you start realizing that this move is now unsafe. It is actually punishable. So that is something very important to understand. And so yes, again, if a move cannot be punished, it is considered safe on block. So in other words, if you have a move that cannot be punished by the fastest moves in the game, this is what we call safe on block. So if you can be punished, that's what we mean when we say it's unsafe. However, if it cannot be punished by the fastest move in the game, then it is considered safe on block. So a lot of times you'll hear commentators go, oh, nope, that's safe on block. That's safe on block. That means it can't be punished. And again, we'll see what that looks like. Now I'm going to give you some magic number examples here. I'm going to scroll back here for just a little bit and show you guys this graphic that I have again. I did it top to bottom just to make it easier for me to put the text here next to the categories to make that clear. But in order to make this little graphic a little bit more clearly now, with the examples I'm giving you, I'm turning it onto its side, okay? So the further right, the safer you are, the further left, the less safe you are. And so now we're going to look at this category here. The numbers inside the boxes represent the frame data here on block or on hit. On hit works as well. But you see this 2, 3, -2, 1, -2, -4. These numbers here on block. If you look at these numbers now and you go to Street Fighter V, you can now start putting these moves into categories. So if you see that the number over there is 3 or greater, that means you have a large advantage. If it's +1 or +2, you have a slight advantage. It's your turn. If it's -1 to -2, you have a slight disadvantage, and it's their turn. However, as I mentioned over here, it cannot be punished, so it's safe on block. So this is what you're going to start finding out, is that the moves that are in the slight disadvantage category are safe on block, but it is now the opponent's turn. This is something that is going to be super common in most fighting games these days. In fact, this might be the most important box category of everything in all of this, in all of these categories that are available here. But -3 or less means now it's punishable, and so it is now unsafe. Tekken 7, different numbers now. Now you have to be 10 or greater to be a large advantage. If you're anywhere between +1 to +9, you have a slight advantage. If you're anywhere between -1 and -9, now you have a slight disadvantage. And if you're -10 or less now, you are punishable. So this is Tekken's numbers here. We're going to look at one more example, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. If you're +5 or greater, you are going to have a big advantage. If you're +1 to +5, then it's your turn. If you're -1 to -5, safe on block, but slight disadvantage, their turn. And -5 or less, you are punishable. So you're starting to get this idea here, but don't forget, I just want to make sure and remind you that there is the one last category here, which is 0, And like I said, this is actually very rare. It's very rare to find situations where a move leaves you 0 on hit or on block. And again, this is absolutely intentionally designed. Fighting games very rarely intentionally put you into this accidentally put you into this situation. It's almost all very intentionally designed these days. This is how fighting games generally work. But having reminded you of that now, you're probably starting to get an idea of what the magic number is. The magic number for Street Fighter V is 3. The magic number for Tekken 7 is 10. And the magic number for Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is 5. And why is this? Because in Street Fighter V, the fastest move that most characters have is 3 frames. In Tekken 7, the fastest move that pretty much every character has is 10 frames, which is generally standing 1 and down 1 and crouching 1. You know, just the little standing punch or the little crouching punch. Those are 10 frames. Those are the fastest moves that you generally have in Tekken 7. In Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, almost everybody's close-up light attack is 5 frames. And so 5 now has become the magic number for Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. Now, if you look at this, the way the chart is, it is very balanced and it is very mirror imaged. And the numbers will never differ. When you have the magic number is king. On the right side, it's going to be the same category, 1 to 9. If it's 1 to 9 on one side, it's -1 to -9 on the other side. If it's +5 or greater on one side, it's going to be -5 or less on the other side. So this is why the magic number is so dominant, and it's because the situations are mirrored. One of the trickiest things about this is if I actually mirrored these charts, that would be the opponent. So in other words, if I did a move that's +1 or +2, and it's now my turn, for my opponent, it's now -1 or -2 for them, so it's a slight disadvantage for them. You know, if I did a move that's +3 or greater, that means it's -3 or greater for them. So that gives me the combo block string possibilities. It's all mirror image. Whatever you are will always be the opposite for the opponent. So that's why this little categories are always going to be mirror image in terms of the magic number, and why the magic number pretty much determines both sides of things. So yes, whatever the number is going to be on one side is going to be the same on the other.